Hello, welcome to the Family Retort. This week's topic is guns. We have differing views. I have the very traditional blue viewpoint of only living in the city, not being very for them, but we both have cousins who go hunting and stuff like that, so I do understand that there is some nuance to the conversation, and Eric has a very different view.
Yes. So I also grew up, and we both have the same cousins. So you know, since we are a family. Uh,
Yes, that's why I said we.
but I also was actually very against guns for the longest time. What changed for me was I joined the military, and that's not actually what did it. What did it was is I moved to Alaska, and I don't know if you've been to Alaska or not, but it is a very open uh, gun state. They just have guns everywhere. You can go to a supermarket, you can get something. It's you can go and get groceries, buy a gun, walk out the same place. It's pretty cool.
Wait,
But
you can buy a gun at the grocery store in
yes,
Alaska
Fred Meyers.
with with without anything? Like, could you buy it like it's a bottle of milk?
I mean, if you are have if you run by the certifications, yes. So if you pass your background check, you can go buy it. They'll walk you out, but you can turn around and walk back in because it's open carry state. So that means you can have it on your hip without any kind of licensing or extra additional information.
I am so shook. Wow. Um, my so I had a question that I thought would be interesting. I think that people's views of guns differ because guns symbolize so many different things to different people. And it's really about what the guns symbolize, not just what guns themselves are, because they symbolize things for people. So I wanted to know what guns symbolize for you and why.
Well, guns for me symbolize a few different things. Mainly protection. Protection in hunting to some extent. I'm not a big hunter. I never really have. It's just not my thing. But for those who do, provide food for your family, it's a good way of getting a lot of meat for essentially very low cost. But I'm more in the I have guns for protection. Not all my guns are for protection. Some of them are just kind of fun and uh, goofing off with. But, if somebody invades my house, I'm not going to rely on the police to get there in a timely manner. I'm going to essentially start blasting and, you know, God forbid this ever does happen, but I want my family to be protected. And I don't trust the government to adequately do that. What do you, I'm going to kick it back over to you. What do you think gun kind of symbolizes for you?
So, what I'm hearing, it's not really just about protection. It's actually almost more about self sufficiency because and about self reliance. Because it's not necessarily about protection, it's about because there's a lot of different ways you could protect yourself, but it's that you don't trust the police, it's you could trust yourself, that you have that self reliance and
Yes,
self protection.
it
So,
is a lot to do with like self-reliance and, again, what's the response time to a deathly emergency? If you need somebody there immediately, they're somebody's not going to be in the area. Um, and to an extent, I agree with like Alaska laws where it's open carry. I have never felt more safe. And this was, like I said, I turned into a gun person while I was in Alaska. I would say about a year or two into it out of the 4 years I was up there. And even before then, I felt very comfortable going out. You know, you saw the mass shootings going on in, let's say, California, and I know in Alaska that would never happen because there's about 20 to 25 people in this store who would step up, and if somebody came in with a shotgun and just went crazy, started blasting, they would have their guns ready and fired at that guy, and there'd be like from 20 different angles going at that one crazy person.
I totally get that. My stepdad often says everybody's nice in Alaska because everybody's packing heat. But to
It's so
me,
true.
guns symbolize something a little bit differently because my experience is largely not practical, right? I'm mostly hearing about stuff from the news. Obviously, yes, I hear shots around my neighborhood sometimes, but it's not like I'm ever affected or anything like that. And I live in the city, so it's like, oh yeah, sure, that one sketchy area somebody got shot.
Yeah, I
It's
mean,
not
that's most places though too.
exactly, it's not that. But to me, like guns symbolize violence, specifically male violence, and sometimes like white supremacist male violence, especially when you consider who mass shooters target and those specific areas. Like, it's not the guns that I have to deal with, it's like the after effects of guns. When I'm going out with my friends, after there was that shooting, the first mass shooting at a gay nightclub, there all of them the gay nightclubs had to start checking everybody's bags for
But
guns.
wasn't
So
the
that was
guy
the after effect.
wasn't the guy gay? I know for a while they tried to pin him as like a white nationalist, but wasn't the guy like a gay Islam or something? And then he just kind of went off the deep end.
Uh Maybe for the first one, I don't know. And I think a lot about there's also that one mass shooting where that one guy had this like tirade against like women. It was like some sort of weird incel manifesto, and he like just shot up a bunch of girls.
So,
And then there was also that one that shot up a black church and that one that shot up a black grocery store. And so it's not necessarily me specifically that's targeted. It's just like communities near me that I'm friends with that are targeted. And so to me, even though I know that I'm not directly at like the same level of threat, that's what guns symbolize to me. When people push so hardcore to have guns, that's what it feels like to me because I don't feel like other demographics have the same freedom to have guns to the same degree.
all right.
Because I understand that there is like a lot of racism behind when gun laws were first instituted, but
Well,
I don't know.
so here's something for you then. Um, so I got two things to address. So you hear about
Okay, we're back. Sorry, we had some technical difficulties, but I think we got everything solved. Anyway, so gun stuff. We were talking about, mass shootings and how media likes to report on these things. I was going to say there is a lot more you don't hear about where people do protect themselves via firearms. A great example, which actually the news did pick up on, which is a rare, was the
Is it
Texas.
the most recent one where there was a veteran at the gay nightclub that defended and took down the mass shooter?
I was going to say the actually armed parishioner out of Texas, where it was one of these crazy people. Because I do believe that these people, the mass shooters, have some serious, serious issues But what happened was he was going to start shooting up a church in Texas. Well, there was a armed person who was at the mass for the day, and he saw the guy come in. I think he got off 2 rounds, immediately got hit, and went down. So he prevented many people from dying. And this guy was a 71-year-old former reserve deputy sheriff. What,
I'm
like,
sure.
how,
Like,
so my thing is even though, you know, you may not hear about all the people that get saved by somebody attacking them and shooting their attacker, a home invasion, or something akin to that, is you think it's just media doesn't want to report on it because it's not like sensationalized and doesn't fit their narrative, or what? Because I guarantee
well, how is
you
that not sensational? Because I feel like somebody defending their home from a home invader and the parishioner or whatever, like that was reported because you did hear about it. So I feel like those things do get reported on. They just don't stick out to me because they're not my demographic, and I don't imagine myself as some guy with a gun who's going to be the hero and shoot somebody who's like on a mad binge to like kill people, you know? It's not something that
so it doesn't it doesn't fit your narrative, is what you're telling me. It doesn't fit the traditional, I guess, blue side of things where they believe all guns are bad and evil and must be stopped because mass murders are rampant.
If I heard more narratives about like lesbians with guns, I feel like I'd be way more pro gun. Okay. Like if there was more like queer people with guns, like women like defeats her abuser with guns type narratives. If I heard way more of those narratives, I would probably be way more into guns than I am.
So, okay,
but
here's a good one for you then.
I hear some, but mostly I'm hearing woman on trial for defending herself against her husband. So to me, it doesn't have that same narrative hook that it might have for someone like you. We have different biases.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely true. I fully believe firearm safety should be taught to everybody. I think everybody should have a basic understanding of how a gun works, how a gun operates. Because the other problem, I think it's teaching.
I'm in favor.
The teaching side of things, too.
I'm in favor of gun safety being taught everywhere. Even if you don't ever intend to have a gun, just knowing basic safety is important because we do live in America. Guns are very prominent. Even if you never intend to have a gun, what if you stumble upon one? What if you're at somebody's house and they have a loaded gun somewhere? You need to know how to hold it safely, how to move it safely, how to unload it properly so that some drunk person doesn't shoot themselves at, like, you know, a house party playing Russian roulette or something.
Well, if they're playing Russian roulette, that's a whole different problem. But
well, I've heard about that happening as a child, so.
Oh my goodness.
I mean, you didn't hear stories about, oh yeah, somebody was drunk and they were like, oh, it wasn't loaded, and they shot themselves in their head and killed themselves? Well, you didn't hear stories like that?
I mean, I've heard dumb people doing dumb things, yes. But in addition, I know a lot of gun-related, we'll say, incidences are accidents and suicides. And while, yes, suicides are horrible and sad, you know, a lot of people blame guns for that when it's not. It's the underlying issues those people have need to be addressed.
I mean, for sure, we should definitely address the white male suicide problem.
Well, there's more suicide people other than just white males, but
Well, that's true, but isn't
Typically,
that a lot of what gun suicides
yes.
are?
Typically,
And that's what like a lot of the gun deaths are about.
gun deaths. White males traditionally shoot themselves when they are suicidal, or
Well, and a lot of it has to do with like economic problems usually.
uh, I'm not sure 100% on the
I mean, not
statistics on
always,
that,
but I feel like sometimes what happens with that is there's some sort of economic hardship going on, and that person feels like they can't help it. Like that's when a lot of suicides happen is after something like somebody is bankrupt, after their house gets foreclosed on, stuff like that. But but it is a demographic. There is a certain appeal to a certain demographic, right?
yeah, it's the easy thing to do. But going to the safety and education and all that, a lot of it is like accidental, or kids finding their parents' firearms and they never taught them anything about that. I mean, I've taught my son at a very young age, hey, these are what real guns look like. These are the real guns in this house. These are not toys. And then you run them through the rules. Like, don't point anything you want to shoot. Make sure you never have a gun, or it's never loaded in the house. If you see one out in the open, go tell an adult, don't touch it. You know, kind of basic things like that. And then
How young?
I started him off pretty much at 4. So when
Okay.
he was,
Because that's like when they start trying to get into things.
yes, I mean even earlier, but again, they don't really know. Then it's your responsibility to put that stuff away. It should be locked away. But you know, there's people who don't do that.
Well, I remember when we were with our like when I was with our cousins at some sort of family reunion at somebody's house, I'd be like, "Oh, I know where my dad keeps the gun." It's like them trying to get into the gun locker.
Yeah.
So, the taste of forbidden fruit, sweet, sweet, deadly forbidden fruit.
But again, and then that falls on parents too, especially if you have something loaded, you know, make sure it's in a spot they can't reach, they can't get to, or easily get to. Because kids, you know, find a gun and they go, "Oh my gosh, it's the gun!" Pow, 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 and then accidentally actually shoot it, which is, like I said, that falls on education and you know, not always the parents, but there could have probably been more that they're doing. But you know, it's just one of those things where if you have one gun and it's for protection, and then you kind of forget about it, that it's like in your nightstand, you just don't think of it because it's just not something you're cognizant of every day. Whereas I feel like a lot of, we'll say, right-leaning gun people, they are very conscientious of safety. A lot of places you need to take a safety test in order to be qualified to even buy a firearm. If you fail that, I mean, you got to go and study and retake the test. It's kind of like a pseudo license, but you know, there's a lot of misconceptions that people don't understand. They think that you can just go to a gun show and buy a gun from a gun show, and that's the quote loophole, gun show loophole. There is no such thing. If anybody is found out to have sold a firearm to somebody that shouldn't have bought one, they are usually get in more trouble than the person who got the gun.
How do you qualify shouldn't have bought one?
So what they do is, so this is the process for people who aren't aware of buying a gun, right? You go into a gun store, or I guess in Alaska, Fred Meyer's, which is just kind of like a big grocery chain. Go, "Hey, I'm interested in that gun." They go, "Okay, here's some paperwork you need to fill out." So you fill out some paperwork. In states like California, they go, "Let me see your gun competency test. A lot of places will have that. If you don't have, like, I have a little tiny card that says I passed it via this gun store tested me, I passed, so on and so forth. So I'll show that to them. They know, okay, cool. You've taken the test. You're good to go. Next step. They take your information. They make sure everything is lined up to your license. They go over to a computer. And this is a direct line to the ATF, right? So they pull up your name. They see if you have any outstanding warrants. You have any abuse accusations. Even accusations will, like any police filings, reports, anything. You're not allowed to get a gun.
That's good to know.
Even if it's not substantiated.
Is that federal or is that just blue states?
That's everything. Doesn't matter.
So federal?
Yes.
Or is it all states individually institute that?
It just goes into buying a gun. So I guess technically it would be federal.
Okay.
So it's like a background check. So they background check you. And if you have any federal crimes or have been in prison system, you're not allowed to buy that firearm legally. Now, what criminals do on their own time is what criminals do on their own time. So keep that in mind. But for you to legally get a firearm, it is a process. Then, on top of that, a lot of times states will have a holding period. California is one of them, which is a pain in the ass. So usually they'll hold it for 30 days. I don't know really the explanation for it. But they'll hold on to your gun.
let's say that somebody was suicidal and they wanted to get a gun to kill themselves or having some sort of break. They decide to then they didn't have any previous mental health concerns or whatever like that. Theoretically, waiting that out would allow for any type of extreme emotional reaction or a burst of anger or anything like that. Waiting it out would make sure that they had logical reasons. That's what the 30-day wait is about. Is just to make sure it's not an irrational decision to do something crazy. That's all.
It's annoying, but it is what it is. But for that,
well, I think if it is to protect yourself and it's going to be your lifelong, you're going to protect yourself with your gun your whole life. Waiting 30 days is no big deal. Yeah.
So that's kind of the gun buying process. What do you think that's a fair, assessment? You can't just go in, be a criminal, and get a stack of guns and call it a day.
Well, I don't know anything about the gun buying process, but to me that sounds like a good process to have if that is how it goes.
Yes, that is how it goes. I can attest from personal experience many times.
So there was somebody who I think the parents had the gun or he bought a gun. I'm not sure, but he was 17 and he brought a gun across state lines to shoot at protesters.
Okay.
Like that doesn't seem legal to me. Was that illegal?
You're not talking about Kyle Rittenhouse, are you?
I might be.
Because he legally...
There's
He didn't... We're not going to get into this right now.
Well, was what he did legal or not?
Yes, technically. He did everything he was supposed to. He also got exonerated by a grand jury, so you can't say he was illegally doing anything.
So it's perfectly legal. So he did all the background check or whatever because he was maybe 17 or 18. So there's nothing that could potentially be against him.
He
waited
18.
the 30 days.
Yeah.
He was 18.
He
waited the 30 days.
Hold on.
Did he really have to wait 30 days to get it?
It depends on the state. And he didn't go buy a gun to start shooting it. Okay.
Well,
I-
he
hold-
had a
I'm-
gun and
So he got a gun. He didn't get it to go shoot protesters. A, that's a lot of bullshit. B, he went to go help people. He went to go out and provide medical aid because he knew people were getting injured. He brought it for protection, which is his right to do. Then, out of nowhere, the protesters started turning on him. He could have been killed by the person in the skateboard if he did not defend himself. And, per his legal defense, he was in his right to shoot those people who were trying to kill him.
Interesting.
If he did not do that, he would have been dead.
Okay.
And I know the Kyle Rittenhouse thing, you guys really like to attack him on this, but per law, per his court trial, he was found not guilty. I don't give a shit what you guys think. Per the law, he's fine. He did, again, it might not have been the best idea, but he did need it, which is unfortunate.
Well, here's my question. Do you think bringing a weapon into an area is a show of aggression?
No, not at all. Especially when it's an aggressive area. These people were rioting. These people were starting fires. How can you not say that that was a sign of aggression?
What is a gun going to do against a fire?
I mean, it's not the gun that's starting the fire now, is it? It's the people.
Well, but it's not like they're lighting people individually on fire.
I mean, they very well could have. I wasn't there. I don't know. They could have been starting fights. They could have been aggressively trying to attack people. He was attacked with a frickin' skateboard. That person was trying to kill him with a skateboard. How is that not aggressive?
You don't think bringing a weapon into an area is a form of aggression?
No. I think it's a sign of protection. He knew that it was a little bit of a hot area. He knew that, it's a... How should I explain this? All right. I have a good example. I have a good story. So, I was in Alaska, right? This was 3 o'clock in the morning, right? I heard an ungodly scream for help. This is an apartment complex. And I did the first thing I could think of was to go grab my shotgun and check it out. Check out what's going on, seeing what kind of issue was going on. It was a girl screaming too, by the way. So I had his ex-wife at the time call 911 while I went out there. Keep in mind, my gun wasn't loaded. I just grabbed it because I knew as a show of force, it would be enough, usually. I
So
go
a
out
gun
there.
is a show of force.
It's a deterrent because I knew that that would be enough of a statement so people wouldn't mess with me, if that makes sense. In this situation, it was a little bit different. But I ran out there with my shotgun. This guy was beating his, I don't know if it was a girlfriend, wife. I didn't get enough of the information because it happened so quick. And I started yelling at him to get away. There was a little bit more colorful words. To back off, and the cops are coming, and he needs to get on the ground. Or he needs to get away. I wasn't, in his face, jabbing him with it. But I put myself in between him and the person he was attacking. Police came. He had a few different warrants. The second I came out, he was like, "Whoa, man, there's no need for this. There's no need for this." And I was like, "There is, and you need to stop right now. Police are coming, and they're going to arrest you." Because you're beating, I can see, She was bleeding from her face.
Jesus.
It was bad. It wasn't like, and it could have been worse. He might have been able. If I didn't intervene, he could have killed her. I fully believe it, because he had multiple abuse. He like we got the information after the fact from the police, because we're like, hey, we'd like to keep on this case. If you need anything from me, like, I'm be willing to
Seems
make a
like
statement.
part of what was great was that there was a lot of warrants out for his arrest. Did he go home afterwards that, or was he arrested?
Oh, he was arrested on the spot.
That's great.
But
That's a real relief to hear.
yeah, this poor girl.
Because imagine if he wasn't arrested on the spot, if there were no warrants, right?
But here's the thing.
Even if you had been there with a gun, right? If he had a gun at home, then what would have happened?
Yeah, potentially. Well, he shouldn't have had a gun to begin with, but anyway.
Well,
sometimes bad things
somebody
happen.
has to report something
So anyway,
for that to show up.
the point I'm getting at is, if I didn't have that gun, I probably couldn't have stood up to this guy, because I'm not physically very fit, right? But I understood that just the having it there was enough of a deterrent to stop the attack and him attacking me. Get the police out there.
Even if you were physically fit, like even if you were proficient in some sort of martial art, you have a more wiry body type. So you are not physically giant and intimidating.
Exactly, yeah. So, for Kyle Rittenhouse, let's go back to that. That leads into the point of, even though he was there helping people out, I understand why he had it on him as a deterrent. As a, oh, well, that guy has a gun, I'm not really going to mess with him kind of thing. Especially if stuff got out of hand, which it obviously did.
I just don't believe that bringing a gun to that kind of situation can do anything but cause an escalation. A gun is de facto escalation.
No, I disagree. Because, again, my personal anecdotal story was, it was a de-escalation. Because in situations...
And if he had a gun, right, you think everybody should have a gun. If he had a gun?
Yeah, I think everybody should have guns.
So
Then
if the guy had a gun, then what had happened? You had walked into a scene with an unloaded gun as a show of force. If he had a loaded gun, then what would have happened?
Well, hopefully the police would have gotten there quick enough. But,
yeah, I sure hope so.
But, I mean, again, it's the fact of the matter is I didn't think about that because it didn't matter. I heard somebody screaming for help. I went to go help.
And you helped. That's awesome.
Right?
I'm so glad.
And, you know, if you would have had a gun, generally people don't just fire guns at people willy-nilly. More often than not, unless you're hardened criminals or gang members or that kind of stuff, but that's a little different. Just from what I could tell, I pretty much figured he wouldn't have a gun, or he might have probably used it already, and it wouldn't have even mattered if I would have been out there in the first place.
Fair.
So, and I would take a shotgun over a handgun in a fight any day.
Why?
Spread. Because shotguns fire like BB pellets, so you're shooting like 20 different little round balls in a big circle, and the further you get away, the bigger the spread.
Interesting.
Yes. So. Anyway.
So do you not have to aim as well with a shotgun?
No. It's a lot more forgiving. And it's just as deadly as anything else. And it's, I mean, you gotta have to, at a certain point, you gotta have to worry about penetration. So, oh my gosh. So let's say you're in a house, right? And you have a big old rifle and you accidentally shoot it. Well, that'll go through your wall and that'll go through your neighbor's wall and might hit somebody on the flip side of another wall. Whereas handguns maybe will go through one wall and then another wall. It's something you need to be cognizant of too, especially in like defense type situations.
Well, and in densely populated areas, that's where a lot of gun
Yes.
deaths also happen, is from a ricochet almost, or
Well, it's called
one of those.
Yeah, it's not necessarily a ricochet. Ricochet is a little bit different, but I'm not going to
Yes,
get into
yes.
the nuances of.
What is the
that.
right word then? Do you know the right word?
It's called penetration. So like,
Oh, okay.
you're over penetrating something, so you're going further than what you intended to do.
Gotcha.
So let's dial it back since we kind of got into devolving into a little bit of an argument. But I do think there is some gun legislation that you can put in place that is fair. I'm going to kick it off to you and think of what we've been talking about today, what kind of things would make sense for you to have in place.
Well, my pet project is we should ban guns from men aged below 25, because I feel like that irresponsible gun ownership and mass shootings and maybe even suicides, I would have to look up the statistics on that. I believe, from my biased news sample, that is what is causing a lot of the mass shootings and all these things, are just people in that age group and having guns at a time when their frontal lobe isn't fully developed and their emotions are very high. And so if we just waited till people were just a little bit older so that they could be responsible gun owners, if that is what we want, if we're going to be in America with everybody having guns, we should allow people to have fully frontal developed prefrontal cortexes.
Okay.
And that would be my, I mean, we could say women too. Ban set, like gun ownership, you would have to be over 25 in order to buy a gun.
Okay, fair enough. So, just so you are aware, because I don't know if you know this, but to buy a handgun, you need to be 21. To buy a rifle or shotgun, you need to be over 18. Just heads up on that.
That makes sense.
Because generally, handguns are used for like robberies and that kind of stuff. You're not going to find very many robberies or, typically robberies. That kind of violence is not typical of a long arm or shotgun. So rifles.
Right. Rifles are more for hunting and competing, right?
So I think the ATF needs to drop all of its really dumb restrictions and stuff. Because we talked about it a little bit before the show. But there's some just ridiculous things the ATF says and does that doesn't make any sense. And I can't get too many into them in the show right now.
You know,
But I'm not...
when I was listening to your the YouTube video presentation of all the ATF gun laws, it reminded me a lot of how Republicans legislate abortions, where it's not technically impossible, but they sure make it figuratively impossible to follow the rules correctly. Like, you're not really sure. There's this kind of gray line, and it's really the only correct answer is to not have one at all, is what they really want you to do. That's what those laws remind me of, the ATF gun laws.
where it's just kind of like
They're-
ridiculous and like it's so hard to follow that you need to be like up to date on it 24 hours a day
What?
because everything is changing.
Yes, where technically they have to allow it to be legal, but they don't have to allow it to make it easy for it to be legal. They can make it as difficult for you to as possible. And that is their job, is to make it virtually impossible for you to legally have a gun.
Yeah, and I'm not okay with that, honestly. But I will say this, even increasing the age to a few years isn't a horrible idea. Or even owning a long arm to 21. Just make it
I
21.
remember you hated it. I remember you hated my idea.
I mean, okay, 25 is too long, I think. I think at 21 where
That's
you're
when
allowed
your
to drink, it
that's when
should
your
be fine.
prefrontal lobe is done developing. It
Yeah,
really is
but-
25.
I mean, again, they used to teach shooting in high school.
They'll teach shooting, you just can't own a gun.
And have some sort of mandatory certification.
I agree with that one.
Just show your competency.
We should
even-
definitely have like
even a
licenses
little bit.
and insurance. There should be licenses
maybe not
and
so much
insurance.
maybe not so much licenses, but I do like how they have the tests. As much as ire as that gets, look, if you know enough about guns, you can ace the test in literally 10 minutes. It's not that big of a deal. Really, if you don't know anything about a gun, yes, you shouldn't own a gun and you're not going to do good on the test.
My favorite regulation that they do have in place is that if you are a domestic abuser, you can't have a gun. And I know that's in place in the blue laws, and from what I'm hearing, you're telling me that that's basically a federal law and that's everywhere.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's just because of your experience in Alaska, or if you have tried to buy a law in a gun in a red state and the laws are different there,
I've done
because I
both.
think that some places
You
enforce
can't-
it better than others.
You can't get much more red than Alaska. But no, trust me.
Well,
you-
no places ever completely blue or red. So, but
True,
rural areas sure do like their guns, and Alaska is rural, so
incredibly. It's like I said, it's pretty easy. You just walk in there, give them your information. They do your background check. If you pass the background check, you can walk out of the store with a gun within 20 minutes.
okay. So, thank you. So, from what I understand, what guns symbolize to you is like freedom and self-sufficiency, and you think that everybody should have them because to you they can de-escalate a situation from your real life experience of living in Alaska where everybody has had guns, and your experience of where you lived in Alaska. You were able to de-escalate a situation where somebody was actually harming someone. You were able to put a pause on that until the police came and remove somebody from harm.
Yes. And then from what I'm getting from you, it's guns symbolize kind of more shock and awe and terror sort of thing. And, especially when it comes to media, they portray a sense of, I don't want to say guns are evil, because I don't think that's quite what you're portraying it as. But guns aren't great, and they're used in a lot of like suicides and that kind of stuff. And a lot of, I would say, disturbed individuals use them to commit horrific acts.
Yes, it is definitely the violence of it that that the media has exposed me to, and the after effects of how communities react to that, how people feel after that violence, how we are always having drills and safety and security checks to try to mitigate the violence of it, how everything is checking for guns everywhere now.
All right. So, with that, we are done with this episode. Our next episode, we're going to be touching on pop culture. And we're actually going to be talking about one of my favorite shows. It is what makes that time I got reincarnated as slime better than other isekai. What a change
Yes!
of direction from our current
I'm
episode.
very true. I'm so excited.
Yeah, I
I
am
hope
too.
you guys enjoyed listening to this podcast. And we would love to know which side of the fence you are on, if you disagree or agree with our points, and if there is anything we missed, or if you want us to talk about guns again and which things you think we should talk about.
We'll probably
Like,
talk
should we
about
be
guns
fighting
again.
about legislation again? Should we be fighting about legislation, guys? Please vote.
I could talk about guns all day, but all right. Thanks
Oh,
for
I
stopping
know.
by. Have a great day.
Thank you, guys. Signing off.
Bye.
Bye.